Welcome to We Learn, Virtual Learning Network. This is session number 27 of the study of society, and the chapter is Social Networks. Topics to be covered are social network, basic concepts, types of social network, ego-centric personal network, and the social structure. Social network basic concept. The term network has been added only recently to the vocabulary of sociology. It refers to the set of relationships or links a person has with others. The social networks are both structured and created. Social networks basically reflect the nature of links between individuals. So basically the network term has been added recently, and it means the set of relationships or links a person has with other people. The total network of social relationships. Society itself is visualized as a chain of social relations. This chain includes various kinds of relations, for example, acquaintances, friendships, kinships, classmateship, etc. A chain of social relationships among individuals has no boundary except that of the society concerned. The total chain of social relationships may thus be viewed as coinciding with the society itself. The dyadic relations, that is between two individuals, form the chain interconnected through the coupling links of individuals. We may conclude that the concept of total network is oriented to the individual, and we can delimit and extract personal networks out of the total network. So from the total network, social relationships and the personal network can be extracted. Formation and operation of social networks. Right from one's birth, each person becomes a part of a network. The immediate network of newly born human beings, that is their families and kin groups. They are introduced to the social networks of their parents. The basic parameters of social status, such as caste, class, sex, education, occupation, etc., determine how many and what type of networks would be formed. So based on all these parameters, based on social status, based on caste, class, sex, education, various types of networks are formed. Personal and group-based networks. A personal network is a set of linkages which an individual establishes around himself. These linkages may be structurally diverse. If a personal network has the additional morphological characteristic of anchorage, or an ego being the anchor of a personal network, then it becomes an ego-centric personal network. So a personal network is a set of linkages which an individual establishes, and they also be structurally diverse. If a personal network has the additional morphological characteristic of anchorage, then an ego being the anchor of a personal network, it becomes an ego-centric personal network where the ego is important for a person. Personal and group-based networks. In contrast to personal network, the group or impersonal network is viewed in terms of the nature of interaction among its members and in terms of incorporation of its members in the groups. In terms of interaction, we can characterize a group as an aggregate of persons who interact more with each other. Characteristics of personal networks. Personal networks have morphological and interactional characteristics. Morphological characteristics help in the identification of the form of networks, while interactional characteristics of personal networks are discussed in terms of their constituents. Morphological characteristics are anchorage, density, reachability, and range. Interactional characteristics: content, directedness, durability, intensity, as well as frequency. So all these are the elements which characterize interactional characteristics, means the content, what one is talking, the direction, the durability, how much the time the relationship exists, the intensity, as well as the frequency. Ego-centric personal network. An ego-centric personal network is anchored on an individual. It includes all those persons whom he or she is in actual contact. So an egocentric personal network that is anchored on an individual and includes all those persons with whom he or she is in actual contact, and also it contains the friends as well as the family members in which the person comes in contact with. Problems in the delineation of egocentric personal network, nature of contacts, centricity of the ego, nature of transactions, types of social relations, mobilizability of the members, and identification of the boundary. So, all these are problems in the delineation of the egocentric personal network. What kind of people one interacts with, how is the person dealing with them, and also the type of social relations one is maintaining, and the identification of the boundaries and the limits. Nature of contacts. The social contact between any two individuals may vary from a nodding acquaintance and exchange of greetings and pleasantries, say in morning walks, to a continual exchange of obligations with built in expectation of reciprocity. One may have a greeting relationship with many persons in one's neighborhood or a workplace as well. Centricity of the ego. The centricity of the ego is crucial in an egocentric personal network. An individual may have meaningful contacts with several individuals on the basis of which a social network may emerge. So, on the basis of which a social network emerges, an individual has several meaningful contacts with several or various individuals on the basis of which the centricity and the social network emerges. Nature of transactions. Interactions between the members of the personal network are viewed as transactions. Transactions signify those sequences of interactions which are systematically governed by reciprocity. It may be added that reciprocity assumes that both the parties involved in an interaction are satisfied, both consider it beneficial or profitable. So basically, interactions between the members of the personal network are viewed as transactions, and if both the members are satisfied, both the parties are satisfied, and the things are beneficial for them, then it becomes a transaction which is profitable. Types of social relations. In this context, the distinction between expressive and instrumental relationships is relevant. In expressive relationships, one derives satisfaction from the relationship itself. An instrumental relationship is that in which the relationship is a means to certain ends rather than an end in itself. Personal networks are formed by individuals in the pursuit of their self-interests. Then relationships are basically instrumental. Mobilizability of the members. There are four major factors which have a bearing on the mobilizability of a member: relative resources of the ego and member, degree of dependence of the alter on the ego, number of intermediaries between the ego and the alter, the bearing of the demand action on the interest of the alter. Identification of the boundary. In an empirical research on personal networks, the most difficult problem is the determination of the boundary of a personal network. As personal network denotes a set of linkages which exist beyond the duration of any particular action or transaction, the boundary of an action set will vary, while that of the personal network has to be more or less stable. So the personal network has to be more or less stable, and the problem in empirical research is that where the boundary or where the limits exist. Personal network and the social structure. Personal networks are intimately related to the social structure both in its integrational and disintegrational aspects. As personal networks play an important role in the functioning of formal organizations, the relationship between personal networks and social structure can be illustrated by showing how personal networks operate in formal organizations. Personal network and formal organizations. The relationship between social structure and personal network through the study of the interface between personal networks and formal organizations consists of the nature of formal organizations, illustration of formal organizations, and formal organization in a traditional society. The concept of source. The people who are used to operating on a personal basis do not feel secure with an impersonal system. A source may be conceived of as a person through whom the power vested in an authority of a formal organization may be utilized for personal ends. Resource networks and resource groups. Resource networks are extracts from the total network. They are based on the criterion of shared interest in the mobilization of power of formal organizations for personal ends. They may be called partial networks. An ego may have different degrees of understanding with the members of his resource network regarding the mobilizability of each other. So basically, resource networks and resource groups consist of the part of the organization, and they're also shared interest and the mobilization of power of formal organizations. So they all are a part of the organization in which they carry out their own specialized tasks. Resource groups, when the exchange of obligations between the members of a resource group stabilizes the unity, then identity and consciousness of a kind emerges. A resource network would turn into a resource group. Its boundaries identifiable and interactions between the members become patterned. So in resource groups, the interactions become patterned and the boundaries identifiable. Functions of resource networks and groups. The functions of these groups are seen from the point of individuals, formal organizations, and the Indian society. For individuals, they are functional or beneficial because they serve their interests, whether it's in the context of formal organizations or conflicts. They guarantee the requisite support, but for formal organizations, they're highly dysfunctional. So that was all about making resource groups as well as the social networks and how social networks are formed. These are some of the questions. You have to do it yourself. What is a basic unit of a chain of social relationships in a society, and define the ego-centric personal network? That's all. Thank you. Happy learning. We learning.